Step in my dojo, you
Step in my dojo, you
step in my.
Hey. Yo, what up? Hey. Hello. Welcome. At Producer Dojo, we have a constant stream of live events waiting for you to come get your learn on. Sign up at the link below to make sure you don't miss out.
step in my dojo, you step in my
Hey, what's up? Let's do some track feedback. We got some fantastic submissions to go through here. I'm really excited. I gave them each a little preview, and man, there's some really nice work out there. So I'm going to kick things off with a producer by the name of Sketchy Pete. You should all go follow him on SoundCloud now. He is Real Sketchy Pete on SoundCloud, so accept no substitute. This is Fever, G minor to F sharp / C by Sketchy Pete. Let's give it a listen, and then I will see what notes I have. Wow, very cool. There's a lot to like about this track. There's really a lot of good style going on, a lot of really, really nice high fidelity sounds in the song. The vibe is really doing it for me. And, I'm really also very appreciative that you have this very cool graphic designed logo that is not just like a font, it's really clear that some time and thought went into the design of this logo, and this logo looks really professional. So like when I come to this page, I can tell you take your music seriously. And, if you're out there and you're sending around demos, I really got to underscore, like, it is so important to maintain a curated style in the way all of your work appears, on social media and everything. And just, because people will get your visual message before they get your audio message. And if your visual message is, I don't really care about this, it's hard for the audience to be like, oh, I should take this piece of music seriously, because if the creator is not taking it seriously, why should the audience take it seriously, right? So right away, when I come here, seeing that, I'm primed to be like, hey, this is someone who cares, someone who cares about their music. So I made a couple little like technical mix down notes here that I'd like to go through to start. And then I want to kind of show you where there's some more resources that can help. Okay, so the intro of the track had some really, really nice high fidelity stereo texturized glitch sounds. And with those kind of like dissonant sort of moody chords and the glitch sounds and stuff, you're really clearly saying like, hey, this is like tipper detox unit kind of style that I'm going for here, a bit pensive, a bit heady, and a bit psychedelic and stuff. And it's like, it's really clear like what this music is about before it even gets started. So I thought that was really great. Style is just so important. I would put style above technique. Like, once you've got your technique to like a passable level, and you're not like, you're not invalidating your work through lack of technique, style becomes much more important than technique. As long as your technical limitations are not preventing you from conveying the style, like once you have your technique to a passable level, style. So it's really, there's a lot of style there, which is cool, and a lot of personality. I can very clearly see, what your brand is about, what this track is about. I know what I'm listening for and what sort of mood that I'm supposed to be in, where this song is supposed to be right off the bat. But some problems that you have is the beginning, these bass notes are really wandering, like this whole first section up until about 3.5 minutes. Melodically, it just kind of feels like noodling and jamming, and there's a lot of spots where the basses are straying away from the classic pentatonic notes of the scale, and they're really kind of going into the more like nook and cranny sort of wandering notes. But the notes that are chosen, many of them are out of the comfortable range of the bass, and the bass is playing too low for it to sound good, and it starts to sound all kind of flappy and floppy, and the notes are not really reinforcing the groove of the song. The bass is drawing lots of attention to itself by having lots of novelty and lots of new notes all the time, and then the bass is also playing too low. So it's a double whammy of drawing attention to a problem right away. Okay, so that's not good. Whenever you have problems or like weak areas in your production, you don't want to draw attention to them. It's like when you're putting together an outfit for someone, you want to highlight their flattering features and their features that are attractive, and you want to kind of draw the eye away from problem areas. And by having all those bass notes in there, and by having some of them be too low, you're making it so that the listener has to pay attention to this bass and has to pay attention to the fact that it's not working. So I would say watch out with that. And as the drop comes along, the kick would perhaps fit in the mix with sounds that have less texture and less stereo image and less of that kind of like psychedelic high fidelity sound that you're going for. That sort of kick would be fine in a track that didn't have that. But once you've gone and added that like 3D feeling and all the glitchy stereo movement and stuff to the kick, to the rest of the kit, to have this really kind of vanilla kick without that much texture and stuff going on is a bit of a problem. It makes the kick feel like an afterthought or a placeholder. And also the kick, the frequency at which the kick is most noticeable is up in the like 120 range, you know, and it's like got this spitty kind of like poke to it that, you know, you might notice it better on a lower volume with those frequencies, but really, you know, when you want a kick to like sit and feel big and 3D and like the foundation of the mix, you need to make sure that that kick has that like 40 to 50 hertz range, and that range is really prominent in the kick, and that it has that weight and that richness in the sub bass. And then I would say that when you are trying to make the kick work with the rest of the sounds in the composition, you're going to want to make sure the kick has some kind of a texture layer in the highs and the mids that will give it that physicality and that three-dimensional sort of a feeling, so that the kick isn't just like missing from the rhythm up top. So that kind of brings me to one of my main points about this track, and that is that your side chains are very, very aggressive throughout the track. Are very, very aggressive throughout the track. They're full frequency side chains, which means that even your lead sounds are being ducked around the kick. But the problem is that they're being taken out of the way, and then the kick is only really hitting that like 150 hertz range, and it's a short, pokey kick that just doesn't fill in the gap that's created by the sidechain. So what that makes it feel like is that the other sounds are being muted for no reason. And it makes it feel like those riffs are awkward. See, like part of what's so great about sidechaining is like if you have a strong emphasis on the moment of the kick that is doing the side chaining, your ear will naturally kind of assume that there was bass under that moment, or that there was leads under that moment, and that the kick is just so loud that you can't hear those sounds, even though they are still present, your mind assumes. But when there is not enough presence in the kick in the areas that you are side chaining, then the ear, that illusion is ruined, and your ear hears the fact that there's nothing there. So you're like, why will someone please stop muting the lead that element is trying to play? Like, why do you keep interrupting that element? That's kind of what the listener's ear does when you have big side chain shaped holes and no big strong sound in there. So I would recommend that you, if you're going to do full frequency side chaining, you make sure that you have a full frequency kick. And if you're going to side chain your sub, you should always make sure that your kick has frequency content in the frequencies that are missing from the sub. So if you have a kick, like it's often the case in drum and bass records where you'll want to have this kind of rolling breakbeat feel over a sub, you may not need sidechain if you have a pitched up kick that sounds kind of like an old drum break from a funk record that's been pitched up 5 semitones or something, and that kick is not actually hitting down at like, 80 hertz or 30 hertz or whatever, then you may not need sidechain at all. and that kick and that sub could coexist because they don't occupy the same frequency range, at least not with any amplitude, right? So you don't always need sidechaining. You don't always need sidechaining at all of the frequencies. And if you are going to use sidechaining, you should make sure that when the sidechain ducks, there is something that fills that spot, so you're not simply creating holes throughout your song, which is something that this song suffers from. Now, I also think that the groove could be a bit tighter in this song. I feel like a lot of the ideas that kind of made the cut here were sort of the ideas that you have when you're exploring and jamming and like finding what the track does best. And often I will resequence a track. Like once I find like the best groove I can make, I will often resequence the track such that all of the exploratory jamming ideas are omitted, and that I instead focus on delivering the best groove that I can and delivering it as much as possible throughout the track. So the only real moment where this track's groove comes together is this section at around 3.5 minutes, where you've got these longer, steady bass tones. The kind of glitchy sort of high end that you had introduced at the beginning of the second drop, it doesn't really feel like it kind of comes into its own until that section. You've applied a lot of equalizer to that sound, and it sounds a little bit choked and a little bit far away. And when the shorter notes are happening, that sound never really gets to like resonate and be its full self until that 3.5 minute mark. Now, the sections that are problems, I would say this end section here in the first dance drop section, this third section here, I feel is basically completely unnecessary, as is this later section here after the really tight dance section. I think that it would be a good idea if you could introduce a better groove that has a more solid melodic foundation, in that there's the notes that the bass hits, it's really like laying into those notes. It's operating in a range that it is comfortable in, and when it hits those notes, it's just like sitting in those notes and like, bam, here's this awesome sounding note, okay? And bam, here's this other awesome sounding note, and really like presenting it with gusto, whereas this sort of like wandery exploring bass where it's hitting all these notes that don't fit, that's like, as a dancer, this drop feels like you're still waiting, and it never really comes together until the middle section of the second drop. So I would say that it would be a good idea to like explore this first drop theme, perhaps with a more steady bass. Maybe you could use the same notes that you used in this section at 3:30, but withhold the mid-range and highs on that bass that you're using as the kind of like expanded moment in that second drop that makes it like the second drop that's better than the first drop. So if you use some of that more steady kind of, melodic foundation and harmonic foundation for this first drop, and really made this like groove super awesome, and then just ditch this third section, then basically build up, go right into the best groove here, have 2 sections of best groove, and then the outro. So you want these dance sections, because this is a piece of dance music. Like, I know it's being like chill and relaxed and everything, but the way the drums are, the way a lot of the sound design is, the way that the build-ups are and everything, this track is telling me like, hey, this is a piece of dance music for sound system play. And if you've designed it for sound system play, you want to make sure that you're scratching that itch for the people who are on the dance floor. If you're going to weird them out, you want to weird them out with style rather than an unconvincing groove. Like, I'm all for scaring people away from the dance floor by playing really challenging music, but the way in which the music is challenging should be stylistic and not a matter of execution. Okay. Yeah, and then even in that section that really works, the holes in the side chain are making the bass feel jumpy. It's like there's these big kind of like gaps, and then it's like it's the loudest sound in the song, and the problem of the holes, because the kick is not present enough, that problem of the holes is very pronounced even in that best section. So I would say fix that. And then one of the biggest, most important things is that the mix must always have focus, and I feel that this track is lacking in focus. Like the intro has some really nice focus, but once the track gets going, it's really lacking in focus, and the groove is especially lacking in focus. So what do I mean by focus? Well, I would suggest that you check out this workshop called Composing the Mix, and this is a workshop that I did about the vital three-way relationship between mixing, composition, and sound design. Now, all of these forces work together. That's what being a producer is being able to master the three-way relationship of mixing, composition, and sound design. If you pursue any of these aspects in isolation, there's only so far you can go. Understanding how those dynamics interact, how those forces interact in your piece is essential. So now the best way I can think of to explain it is that when your average listener is listening to a piece of music, they hear two things. The singer, which stands out, enjoys the spotlight and is the main feature of the song, and then the band, which function as a unit and try not to draw attention to themselves. They're doing, without the band, there is no song, and all of the sounds that are in the band, so to speak, are serving essential roles to propel the composition, but they're not trying to draw attention to themselves. They're trying to execute a function in a competent and confident way that feels as though there's nothing missing and there's nothing extra, right? So getting those extra sounds to really work together is essential. And your bass problem, for example, where the bass is wandering all over the place and hitting notes that are out of the range, that bass sound is essentially it's getting in the way of the singer in your song. The singer being these fantastic textures and sound designs that you've made. To really make the sound design and the stereo imaging and the texture shine, you need the rest of the sounds to play a supporting role, and that supporting role needs to be stable. It needs to provide a stage of sound that the main lead sounds can occupy and shine on, right? So, and then, like the side chain, for example, is another one of those things where, it's serving a functional role, and you're missing the function of that role without getting things out of the way to have to make room for this big epic kick and snare. The side chains are drawing attention to themselves, and it's not functioning as a band member, because the side chain is, if you think about it, it is like a member of the band that serves a specific function, but it's compromising that function by drawing too much attention to itself. So in this workshop, Composing the Mix, I go through a lot of these different philosophies of sound interaction, and that I feel will really help you to give your mix focus.
You usually end up putting the details first. You end up ignoring the big picture, getting stuck in a loop, and eventually you say, this doesn't sound like my hero. You give up and you start over. This happens all the time. If it's happening to you, don't worry about it. You're not bad if this is happening to you. This is a normal part of making music. Every producer has to go through this stage.
Understanding how these three forces, mixing, composition, and sound design, come together is absolutely vital to making your music sound loud and clear and well mixed. if you don't know why, it's a mind-boggling sea of details. So if you want to know why to do what when you're composing the mix, you should check out my course, Composing the Mix.
You should also check out this workshop, the workflow workshop. And in the workflow workshop, I talk about, sort of an order of operations or like a linear workflow recipe. And I feel like, your music is very sound design heavy, which is great. And I love the sounds that you've designed, especially all those glitchy textured sounds in the intro, and a lot of the chords and stuff that you've chosen are very, very evocative and very signature sounding. But I feel like there are aspects of your workflow where you're putting the cart before the horse with these sounds. And I think that if you learn to create a harmonic and melodic and groove foundation for your song using sounds that are less amazing, then later when you bring in the amazing sounds, everything will come together in a very natural and effortless way. And I find that working in this way really helps me to make sure that I have that solid foundation of groove and melodic and harmonic structure at the outset. It's like when a songwriter will sit down at a piano and play a song that is destined to be like a trance hit. There might not be any piano in that song at all in its finished form, but by sitting down and working it out on a piano, they can make sure that the harmonic rhythm of the way the chords are changing and that the melodies and everything are right in the pocket, so that when you then revoice those sounds later with the more advanced sound design, that it all comes together naturally and it all fits. So I'd say definitely check those out. And then another thing that you should check out is the iLL Methodology Drum Sound Design. And this is a course where I take you through every different type of drums. And there is this whole series here on kicks that is just like video after video on kicks. And then there's Ableton racks for every step of the process, and there's a handbook for it and everything. It shows you how to use kick 2 to make a kick. It shows you how to use operator to make a kick. It shows you how to use serum to make a kick. It shows you how to make a kick with layered samplers or layered devices inside of an instrument rack. There's examples and there's downloads, and I think that if you explore specifically the kick sound design section of the drum sound design workshop, you'll be able to really get that kick to be the driving force that it needs to be to bring your song together. I'd also like to draw your attention to this there's a weekly download that is included in the Wise Beyond Your Ears course. This Wise Beyond Your Ears course is a selection of different philosophical discussions for you to think about how they interact with your music. And there's one that I think is worth checking out, and that is Bad is Good. And this is one that I really wish that I had understood earlier. But basically, when you're the type of person who's like into mixing and into sound design, there's this urge to try to make every sound a masterpiece that can stand alone, right? And while this may be, a noble motivation, and it is good to want to put effort into your music, and it's good to make your own sounds, when every sound is like this super crazy rule-breaking designer sound that is like, hitting hard and it's got wild texture and all this stuff, when every sound is drawing attention to itself, it can be very difficult for the composition as a whole to work, and it's like your listener can get kind of like detail overload or like input overload when like everything is amazing, nothing stands out anymore. So in this Bad is Good lecture, I go through some examples of classic, timeless, amazing pieces of music that have certain specific sounds that when you point them out and you listen to them, you're like, wow, that sound is actually fucking terrible. I would never have chosen that sound if it were in a sound design library. What's up? And realizing that, in a lot of the best compositions, there are sounds that are intentionally kind of shitty or kind of bland or kind of boring. And that there is there's a role for intentionally shitty, intentionally bad sounds in a composition. And a lot of the time, you can make a sound that has so much presence and style in a composition by just destroying it and making it super tiny, and there's a lot of time where you listen to like a Mr. Carmack beat or like a Saruda beat, and they'll have this kick that just doesn't have any highs, it doesn't have any bass, all the audio fidelity is gone, and it's just this like super distorted little in the mid-range. But because of the way the rest of the beat is composed around it, it still, serves its purpose and provides a lot of vibe and a lot of timing information for the rhythm, but it makes the other sounds sound massive when the kick is all blown out and shitty, right? So in your song, for example, your kick sound, part of what's making it not work is not merely that it is a 120 hertz little spit of transient, but it's also that it's relatively unprocessed. And the rest of the sounds in the song have very extensive processing. So you may have been able to get away with a composition that centers around a spitty, lo-fi sort of 120 hertz kick if you destroyed that kick with like tons of lo-fi processing and vinyl crackle and a lot of distortion and stuff, so that it sounds like the kick is just like this broken, blown out speaker membrane. It might be able to have enough presence just as a 120 hertz little spit that all those side chains feel natural, because that kick, you're just like, whoa, that kick is destroyed, right? But it's the cleanliness of the kick. It's not just that it is not delivering in terms of having sub bass and having high texture to compete with the other sounds. It's the fact that it's so vanilla, right? So I would say check out the Bad is Good weekly download, and it will give you confidence to break the rules within your style a bit more, and to be able to, make sounds that are like super destroyed work in the composition. Because, Detox Unit and Tipper, if you start listening for sounds, like listen for the bad sounds and ask yourself, like, why is this sound actually bad? Because both of those artists, they make really amazing, like objectively beautiful mix downs. But within that, there are some sounds that are like super destroyed, that provide contrast. And a really great metaphor for this, I heard from Nick from Noisia, who said that, when you're drawing a cartoon, you don't include every single detail. The object of a cartoon is not to be photorealistic. It is to omit details and present some of the areas of the frame in a very sketchy, loose sort of a way, which lets your eye know that these other elements that the artist has spent more time capturing the nuances of, that those elements of the composition are what's important. And if everything is important, nothing is important. If everything is trying to grab your attention, nothing grabs your attention. Sometimes you need to have sounds that are blown out and bad and shitty to make the sounds that are beautiful and amazing really fit. So Yeah, thank you for your submissions, Sketchy Pete. That was a great track. I really enjoyed it. It's quite promising. I know I just rattled off a list of ways that it could be improved, but I do think that there is a very solid foundation and that this is already a track you can be proud of. And if you take into consideration some of those things and, check out the materials that I recommended, I'm sure your track will be fantastic in no time. Lots of love.
All by itself.